Maria Santos was a nurse for 12 years at Riverdale General Hospital. Everyone knew her as the nurse who always smiled, even after working for 16 hours straight. She was 38 years old, with kind eyes and a face that showed both tiredness and strength. Maria lived in a small blue house on Oak Street with her daughter Sophia, who was 10 years old. Every morning, Maria woke up at 5 o'clock a.m. She made breakfast for Sophia, packed her lunch, and then drove her to school before heading to the hospital. Maria's car was old and made funny noises, but it got them where they needed to go. She couldn't afford a new one on her nurse's salary, especially as a single mother. At the hospital, Maria worked in the emergency room. It was a busy place with bright lights and constant movement. Doctors rushed from patient to patient while nurses like Maria made sure everything ran smoothly. She checked vital signs, gave medicines, talked to worried family members, and wrote everything down in patient charts. Maria is the best nurse we have, Dr. Thompson often said. She notices things others miss. This was true. Maria had a special ability to sense when something wasn't right with a patient. She couldn't always explain it, but she trusted her feelings. Many times, this had helped save patients when their condition suddenly got worse. On Tuesday morning, the emergency room was busier than usual. 3 car accident victims had arrived, and 2 people were having heart problems. Maria moved quickly between rooms, checking on everyone. That's when they brought in Mr. James Wilson. Mr. Wilson was a tall man in an expensive suit. He was 62 years old and very pale. The paramedics said he had collapsed during a business meeting downtown. His blood pressure is dropping. One paramedic told Maria as they moved him to a bed. He was conscious when we arrived, but he passed out in the ambulance. Dr. Adams, the new doctor who had only been at the hospital for 2 months, quickly checked Mr. Wilson. Probably just stress and dehydration, he said. Start an IV, give him fluids, and monitor his vitals. I'll be back to check on him after I see the car accident victims. Maria nodded and began setting up the IV. As she worked, she looked carefully at Mr. Wilson. Something didn't seem right. His breathing was shallow, and his skin felt clammy. These could be signs of shock. But why would a healthy-looking man go into shock from dehydration? She checked his wallet for ID and found a small medical card. It said Mr. Wilson was allergic to penicillin and had a heart condition. Maria immediately checked the medicines the paramedics had given him in the ambulance. Her heart stopped when she saw it. They had given him a medication that contained a compound similar to penicillin. It wasn't their fault. They didn't have his medical history. But now, Mr. Wilson was having an allergic reaction that was affecting his heart. Maria pressed the emergency button and called out, "Code Blue in room 4. She quickly grabbed the emergency medication card and prepared an injection that would stop the allergic reaction. Dr. Adams rushed in. "What's happening?" "Allergic reaction to the medication given in the ambulance," Maria explained quickly. "He needs epinephrine now. His heart is failing." Dr. Adams hesitated. "Are you sure? Let me check his chart first." Maria knew there wasn't time to wait. Mr. Wilson's lips were turning blue, and the monitor showed his heart rate becoming dangerously irregular. In that moment, Maria made a decision that would change her life forever. Maria's hands moved quickly as she prepared the epinephrine injection. Her heart was beating fast, but her movements were steady. Years of experience had taught her how to stay calm in emergencies. "We can't wait," she told Dr. Adams firmly. "His airway is closing. Look at his oxygen levels." The monitor showed Mr. Wilson's oxygen dropping dangerously low. His face was swelling, and his breathing sounded like a whistle. Dr. Adams still looked uncertain. "Hospital rules say I need to verify the allergy myself before." Maria made her choice. "I'm sorry, doctor, but he'll die if we wait." She pushed Dr. Adams aside and injected the epinephrine into Mr. Wilson's IV line. Almost immediately, the terrible whistling sound of his breathing began to ease. The monitors showed his heart rate stabilizing. "Start oxygen and get ready for a second dose if needed," Maria instructed the other nurse who had just entered the room. Then she turned to Dr. Adams, whose face had turned red with anger. "You had no right to do that without my permission," he said in a low voice. "I am the doctor here." "With all respect, sir, he was dying," Maria replied. "I've been a nurse for 12 years. I know anaphylaxis when I see it." Mr. Wilson's color was returning to normal. His body relaxed as the medicine worked against the allergic reaction. Maria checked his vital signs and wrote them in his chart. Dr. Adams left the room without another word. Maria knew she had made him angry, but saving the patient had been more important than following the chain of command. She had seen too many people die while waiting for approvals and signatures. An hour later, Mr. Wilson opened his eyes. He looked confused but much better than before. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Riverdale General Hospital," Maria answered with a smile. "You had a severe allergic reaction, but you're going to be okay now." Mr. Wilson tried to sit up. "I remember feeling my throat close up. It happened once before, years ago." "Yes, it was an allergic reaction to a medication. The paramedics didn't know about your allergy." "Thank you," he said, looking at her name badge. "Thank you, Maria." She smiled and adjusted his pillow. "Just doing my job, Mr. Wilson. Try to rest now." Maria finished her checks and left the room. In the hallway, she saw Ms. Patel, the hospital administrator, talking with Dr. Adams. They both looked serious, and when they saw her, they stopped talking. "Maria, please come to my office after your shift," Ms. Patel said. Maria nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She knew what this was about. For the rest of her shift, Maria continued caring for patients, including checking on Mr. Wilson regularly. His condition improved steadily, and by afternoon, he was sitting up and talking. He mentioned he was some kind of businessman, but Maria was too busy to chat long. At 3:00 p.m., her shift ended. She changed out of her scrubs and walked to Ms. Patel's office on the 4th floor. The office was large, with a view of the city. Ms. Patel sat behind a big desk, while Dr. Adams stood by the window. "Please sit down, Maria," Ms. Patel said. Maria sat in the chair facing the desk. Her hands were shaking slightly, so she folded them in her lap. "Dr. Adams has reported that you administered medication to a patient without doctor approval," Ms. Patel began. "Is this correct?" "Yes," Maria answered honestly. "Mr. Wilson was having a severe allergic reaction. His airway was closing, and there wasn't time to wait." "That's not your decision to make," Dr. Adams cut in. "I was assessing the situation." Ms. Patel raised her hand to stop him. "Our hospital has clear protocols, Maria. Nurses cannot administer emergency medications without doctor approval. You know this." "I do know it," Maria said. "But I also know that Mr. Wilson would have died while waiting." Ms. Patel sighed and opened a folder on her desk. "This isn't the first time you've gone against protocols, Maria. Last month, you changed a patient's pain medication dosage without consulting the doctor first. The patient was in severe pain, and the doctor was in surgery," Maria explained. "Nevertheless, these are serious violations." Ms. Patel's voice became formal. "I'm afraid we have to terminate your employment effective immediately." Maria stared at Ms. Patel, unable to believe what she had just heard. "Terminated? You're firing me for saving someone's life?" "We're firing you for repeatedly breaking hospital protocol," Ms. Patel explained. Her voice was calm but firm. "This isn't about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that puts the hospital at risk." Dr. Adams nodded. If something had gone wrong with that injection, the hospital could have been sued. "You can't just do whatever you think is right." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She wouldn't cry in front of these people. "I've worked here for 12 years. My patient reviews are excellent. I've never had a major mistake." "Your skills aren't in question," Ms. Patel said. "But we need nurses who follow the rules. I'm sorry, Maria." Ms. Patel pushed a folder across the desk. "This has your final paycheck, including 2 weeks' severance pay. Please return your ID badge and clear out your locker before you leave." Maria's hands felt numb as she took the folder. How would she pay her rent? How would she take care of Sophia? Nursing jobs weren't easy to find, especially good ones with health benefits. "Can I at least finish the week?" she asked. "I need time to find another job." Ms. Patel shook her head. "I'm sorry, but the termination is effective immediately. Security will escort you to your locker." A security guard was already waiting outside the office. Maria walked with him to the nurse's locker room, feeling like a criminal. Some of her coworkers saw her and looked confused. Her friend Tanya tried to ask what was happening, but the security guard told her to step back. "Call me later," Tanya whispered. Maria emptied her locker quickly. 12 years of work, and everything fit into one small bag: a spare set of scrubs, some photos of Sophia, a coffee mug, and a few medical reference books. As she walked out of the hospital for the last time, she passed Mr. Wilson's room. Through the open door, she could see him sitting up in bed, talking on a cell phone. He looked so much better now. At least she had done that one good thing today. The bus ride home felt longer than usual. Maria sat by the window, clutching her bag, trying to make a plan. She had some savings, but not much. Maybe she could work at a clinic, or even try a different field altogether. But nursing was all she knew, all she had trained for. When she arrived home, the small blue house looked different somehow. It was no longer just her cozy home. It was now a place she might not be able to afford in a few months. Maria unlocked the door and went inside. Sophia wouldn't be home from school for another hour. That was good. It gave Maria time to pull herself together before facing her daughter. She sat at the kitchen table and finally let the tears come. She cried for a few minutes, releasing the shock and anger and fear. Then she washed her face, made a cup of tea, and opened her laptop. Time to find a new job, she said to herself. She updated her resume and started searching job sites. Most nursing positions at good hospitals required references from previous employers. Would Riverdale even give her a reference now? Maybe Tanya or one of the doctors she had worked with for years would help. After an hour of searching, Maria had applied for 3 jobs. None of them paid as well as Riverdale, and one had no health benefits. She closed the laptop when she heard Sophia's key in the door. "Mom, you're home early," Sophia said, dropping her backpack on the floor. "Are you sick?" Maria forced a smile. "No, sweetie. I just have some time off. How was school today?" As Sophia chattered about her day, Maria tried to focus. She wouldn't tell Sophia about losing her job yet. There was no need to worry her. The doorbell rang, interrupting Sophia's story about math class. "I'll get it," Sophia said, running to the door before Maria could stop her. Maria heard her daughter's surprised voice. "Mom, there's a bunch of fancy cars outside, and a man in a suit wants to talk to you." Maria quickly went to the door, wondering who could be visiting. She gently moved Sophia aside and looked out. Her mouth fell open in surprise. There were indeed 3 luxury cars parked in front of her small house: a shiny black Mercedes, a silver Bentley, and a dark blue Audi. In her neighborhood of old sedans and pickup trucks, these vehicles looked completely out of place. Standing on her doorstep was a tall man in an expensive suit. Maria recognized him immediately. "Mr. Wilson," she said in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Mr. Wilson smiled. "May I come in, Maria? We have some important matters to discuss." Maria nodded, still shocked. "Of course, please come in." She opened the door wider, suddenly aware of how simple her home was. The living room furniture was worn but clean. Sophia's schoolbooks were scattered on the coffee table. A basket of unfolded laundry sat on the couch. "Sophia, please go to your room for a little while," Maria said. "But Mom..." "Please, sweetie, just for a few minutes." Sophia looked at Mr. Wilson curiously, then went to her room, leaving her door slightly open so she could listen. "Please sit down," Maria offered, quickly moving the laundry basket. "Would you like some water or coffee?" "Water would be fine, thank you," Mr. Wilson said, sitting down carefully on the couch. Maria went to the kitchen, her mind racing. How did Mr. Wilson find her address? Why was he here? And who was in those other fancy cars? She returned with 2 glasses of water and sat in the chair across from him. "I'm sorry for showing up unannounced," Mr. Wilson began. "But when I heard what happened, I couldn't wait." Maria felt her face grow warm. "You heard about me being fired?" Mr. Wilson nodded. "The new nurse told me everything when she came to check my vitals. She was quite upset about it. Many of the staff are." He took a sip of water. "Maria, I need to tell you something important. My name isn't just James Wilson. I'm James Wilson of Wilson Global Enterprises." Maria's eyes widened. Even she had heard of Wilson Global Enterprises. It was one of the largest technology companies in the country, with offices all over the world. "I own hospitals in 5 states," Mr. Wilson continued, "and medical research facilities in 3 countries. "I don't understand," Maria said. "Why are you telling me this?" Before Mr. Wilson could answer, there was another knock at the door. Mr. Wilson smiled. That would be my colleagues. May they join us? Maria nodded, feeling more confused by the minute. She opened the door to find a woman in a smart business suit and an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. Maria, this is Sarah Chen, my Chief Operations Officer, Mr. Wilson said as they entered. And this is Dr. Robert Miller, Chief of Medicine at Westside Medical Center. Maria shook their hands automatically, her mind struggling to make sense of what was happening. Westside Medical Center was the most prestigious hospital in the city. Only the best doctors and nurses worked there. Please, everyone sit down, she said, wishing she had more chairs. Dr. Miller sat beside Mr. Wilson on the couch, while Ms. Chen took the small stool from the corner. Let me get right to the point, Maria, Mr. Wilson said. You saved my life today. The hospital staff later told me that my reaction was severe enough that I likely would have died if treatment had been delayed even 1 minute longer. He leaned forward. Then I learned that instead of being rewarded, you were fired for your actions. This is unacceptable to me. It was against hospital policy, Maria said quietly. I knew the rules when I broke them. Sometimes rules need to be broken, Dr. Miller spoke up. In my 40 years of medicine, I've learned that good health care requires both protocol and judgment. You showed excellent judgment today. Ms. Chen opened a leather folder she had been carrying. Maria, we came here today with an offer. Actually, 2 offers. Maria looked at the 3 visitors sitting in her small living room. Through the crack in her bedroom door, she could see Sophia's eye peeking out, watching with curiosity. What kind of offers? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Chen smiled as she took out some papers from her folder. First, Mr. Wilson would like to offer you a position at his new medical center that's opening next month. A new medical center? Maria asked, her eyes wide with surprise. Mr. Wilson nodded. Wilson Medical Center. It's been under construction for the past 2 years, just outside the city. We're looking for skilled nurses who understand that saving lives sometimes means making difficult choices. The position is head nurse in the emergency department, Ms. Chen continued. Starting salary would be $95,000 per year, plus full benefits and a flexible schedule to accommodate your daughter's needs. Maria gasped. That was more than double what she had been making at Riverdale General. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. That's very generous, she said, her voice shaking slightly. But I'm not sure I'm qualified to be a head nurse. I've never held a management position. Dr. Miller spoke up. That's where our second offer comes in. Before starting at Wilson Medical Center, you would complete a 3-month training program at Westside Medical Center under my direct supervision. This would give you the management skills you need, Ms. Chen explained. And you would be paid during the training period, of course. Maria looked from one face to another, trying to make sense of this sudden change in her fortune. Just an hour ago, she had been worried about paying next month's rent. Now these important people were offering her a dream job. I don't understand, she finally said. Why me? There must be hundreds of qualified nurses you could hire. Mr. Wilson leaned forward. Let me tell you a story, Maria. 10 years ago, my wife became very ill. She was in the hospital for weeks. Some of the doctors and nurses were good, but many were more concerned with following rules than caring for patients. My wife suffered needlessly because people were afraid to make decisions. His voice grew softer. She died, Maria, and I promised myself that someday I would build a medical center where patients came first, where skilled professionals like you could use their judgment without fear. Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. I'm so sorry about your wife. Today, when you made that split-second decision to help me despite the rules, you showed exactly the kind of courage my medical center needs, Mr. Wilson said. That's why it has to be you. Sophia couldn't contain herself any longer. She pushed open her bedroom door and ran into the living room. Mom, are you going to take the job? She asked excitedly. Did I hear right? $95,000? Sophia. Maria scolded, embarrassed. I'm so sorry. This is my daughter. Mr. Wilson smiled. It's nice to meet you, Sophia, and yes, that's the salary we're offering your mother because she's very good at what she does. Sophia beamed with pride. I know. She takes care of everyone. She even takes extra shifts when other nurses are sick, and she never complains. Ms. Chen laughed. Sounds like you've been paying attention. I want to be a doctor when I grow up, Sophia announced. Mom helps me study science. Dr. Miller nodded approvingly. That's wonderful. Perhaps you could visit Westside Medical Center sometime while your mother is training. We have a program for young people interested in medicine. Sophia looked like she might explode with excitement. Really? That would be amazing. Maria felt overwhelmed. This morning, she had been a regular nurse. Then she had been unemployed and worried. Now she was being offered an incredible opportunity that could change both her and Sophia's lives. This all seems too good to be true, she said honestly. Are there any conditions I should know about? Just one, Mr. Wilson said. I need your answer within 48 hours. We're moving quickly to staff the new center. Ms. Chen handed Maria a thick envelope. Here's all the information about both offers, including the benefits package, job description, and training program details. My card is inside if you have any questions. Maria took the envelope with slightly trembling hands. Thank you. I'll review everything carefully. Dr. Miller stood up. We should let you have some time to think about this. It's been quite a day for you. As the three visitors prepared to leave, Sophia tugged on Mr. Wilson's sleeve. Thank you for giving my mom a new job. She deserves it. Mr. Wilson smiled down at her. No, Sophia, thank your mother for saving my life. I'm the one who's grateful. After Mr. Wilson and his colleagues left, Maria sat on the couch, still holding the envelope. Sophia bounced up and down beside her, unable to contain her excitement. Mom, are you going to take the job? Of course you're going to take it, right? We could buy a new car, and maybe move to a bigger house, and I could get a new computer for school. Maria smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. Slow down, Sophia. I need to think carefully about this. It's a big change. But Mom, it's so much more money. And that nice doctor said I could visit the hospital. Maybe they could help me become a doctor someday. Sophia's eyes were bright with hope. Let's read through everything first, Maria said, opening the envelope. Inside were several documents printed on thick, fancy paper with the Wilson Global Enterprises logo. For the next hour, Maria and Sophia read through the job offer. The position really was everything Mr. Wilson had described. The salary was amazing. The benefits included full health insurance, a retirement plan, and even a college savings plan for Sophia. There was also information about the training program at Westside Medical Center. Look at this, Mom, Sophia said, pointing to one page. They have an apartment building for staff near the new medical center. We could live there if you wanted, and it would be only 10 minutes from work. Maria nodded, reading the housing information. The apartments looked modern and clean, much nicer than their current home. The rent would be reduced for medical center employees. As she read, Maria's phone kept buzzing with text messages. News about her firing had spread quickly among the hospital staff. Tanya had texted 5 times, asking what happened and if Maria was okay. Several other nurses and even 2 doctors had sent messages of support. Maria replied to Tanya, telling her briefly about being fired and the surprising job offer. Tanya's response came immediately. OMG. Take the job. Wilson Medical Center will be amazing. Around 7:00 p.m., the doorbell rang again. Maria opened it to find Tanya standing there with 2 other nurses from Riverdale General. We came as soon as our shift ended, Tanya said, giving Maria a hug. Everyone is talking about what happened. Most people think the hospital made a huge mistake. The nurses came inside, greeting Sophia and sitting down in the living room. Is it true that James Wilson himself came to your house? Asked Jenny, one of the other nurses. Maria nodded. Yes, with his chief operations officer and Dr. Miller from Westside Medical Center. Dr. Miller? Tanya's eyes widened. He's legendary. Nurses at Westside say he's the best doctor to work with in the whole city. The whole hospital is in chaos, said Lisa, the 3rd nurse. After you left, Mr. Wilson apparently called Ms. Patel and gave her a piece of his mind. Then he checked himself out against medical advice. Dr. Adams is in big trouble, Jenny added. Turns out he missed some important symptoms in another patient yesterday, too. The senior doctors are reviewing all his cases now. Maria felt a small bit of satisfaction hearing this, but she didn't wish anyone harm. What about my patients? She asked. Who's taking care of them? They divided them among the rest of us, Tanya said. But it's not the same. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying when she found out you wouldn't be her nurse anymore. Maria felt tears form in her eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez was an elderly patient who had been in and out of the hospital for years. Maria had always taken special care with her. I feel bad leaving my patients, she said quietly. I have to think about Sophia's future too. Tanya took Maria's hand. Listen to me. You've given that hospital 12 years of hard work. You've skipped breaks, stayed late, and covered for others countless times. You've earned this new opportunity. Jenny and Lisa nodded in agreement. And think about all the new patients you'll help at Wilson Medical Center, Sophia added. Mom, you always say that good nurses are needed everywhere. Maria looked around at the supportive faces surrounding her. Her daughter's eyes shone with pride and excitement. Her friends had rushed over after work to show their support. You know what? Maria said, making her decision. I think Mr. Wilson is going to have a new head nurse very soon. The room erupted in cheers. The next morning, Maria woke up early, feeling strangely light. For the first time in years, she didn't have to rush to the hospital. Sophia was still sleeping, so Maria made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the job offer papers. After reading everything one more time, she picked up her phone and called the number Ms. Chen had given her. Sarah Chen speaking, came the crisp, professional voice. Good morning, Ms. Chen. This is Maria Santos. Maria, I'm glad you called. Have you made a decision? Maria took a deep breath. Yes, I would like to accept the position. Both the training at Westside Medical Center and the head nurse position at Wilson Medical Center. Excellent. Ms. Chen sounded genuinely pleased. Mr. Wilson will be very happy to hear this. Can you come to our office today to sign the paperwork? Say, 11 o'clock a.m.? Yes, that would be fine. After getting the address, Maria hung up. She felt excited and nervous at the same time. This was a big step, but it felt right. Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas. Did you call them? Are you taking the job? Maria smiled. Yes, I just accepted. I'm going to their office later today to sign the papers. Sophia squealed with delight and threw her arms around her mother. I'm so proud of you, Mom. Thank you, sweetie. Now, get ready for school. Just because I have a day off doesn't mean you can skip class. After Sophia left for school, Maria decided to visit Mrs. Rodriguez. She couldn't just disappear without saying goodbye to her longtime patient. At Riverdale General, Maria felt strange walking in without her nurse's uniform. The security guard at the entrance recognized her and looked confused. Maria, aren't you working today? No, Carlos. I don't work here anymore. Carlos's eyebrows shot up. What? Since when? Since yesterday. It's a long story. I'm just here to visit a patient. Maria signed in as a visitor and took the elevator to the third floor. In the hallway, she ran into Dr. Harris, one of the senior doctors she had worked with for years. Maria, Dr. Harris said, stopping abruptly. I heard what happened. The whole thing is ridiculous. Thank you, Dr. Harris. I appreciate that. Several of us complained to Ms. Patel. That new Dr. Adams had no business reporting you for saving a patient's life. Dr. Harris shook his head. The hospital is making a big mistake letting you go. It's okay, Maria said. I've actually accepted a new position. She told Dr. Harris about Wilson Medical Center and the training program at Westside. His eyes grew wider as she spoke. Working with Dr. Miller? That's impressive. He's one of the best in the field. Dr. Harris smiled. Well, their gain is definitely our loss. Maria continued to Mrs. Rodriguez's room. The elderly woman was sitting up in bed, watching TV. When she saw Maria, her face lit up. Maria, my favorite nurse, where have you been? Maria sat down beside the bed and took Mrs. Rodriguez's hand. I came to tell you something, Mrs. Rodriguez. I won't be your nurse anymore. I had to leave Riverdale General. The old woman's face fell. Oh no, why? You're the only one who knows how to put in my IV without hurting me. Maria explained what had happened, leaving out some details. Mrs. Rodriguez listened, her expression changing from sadness to anger to pride. So this rich man offered you a better job because you saved his life? Good. You deserve it. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed Maria's hand. But I will miss you, my dear. I'll come visit you, Maria promised. And I'll tell the other nurses about your veins, so they'll be more careful with your IV. After saying goodbye to Mrs. Rodriguez and a few other patients, Maria left the hospital. She felt both sad and relieved. At 11 o'clock a.m., Maria arrived at the Wilson Global Enterprises office downtown. The building was tall and modern, with glass walls and a large fountain in front. Inside, the lobby was grand, with marble floors and a security desk where Maria had to show her ID. A young man in a suit greeted her. "Ms. Santos, I'm David, Mr. Wilson's assistant. Please follow me." As Maria rode the elevator to the top floor, she thought about how much her life had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, she was a regular nurse. Today, she was heading to the executive floor of one of the biggest companies in the city. The elevator doors opened, and Maria stepped into her new future. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day. Maria stood in the gleaming lobby of Wilson Medical Center, watching doctors, nurses, and patients move through the bright, open space. The hospital had been open for 3 months now, and it was already becoming known as one of the best in the region. Maria wore a navy blue uniform with a silver pin that read Maria Santos, Head Nurse, Emergency Department. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she carried a tablet that showed patient information. She looked confident and professional, very different from the worried woman who had sat at her kitchen table 6 months ago. "Good morning, Nurse Santos," said Dr. Lee as she passed by. "The new equipment for Room 4 arrived this morning." "Thank you, Dr. Lee. I'll check it right away," Maria replied with a smile. Maria's 3-month training at Westside Medical Center had been challenging but rewarding. Dr. Miller had taught her not just about managing a nursing department but also about creating a culture where good medical care came first. Maria had worked hard, taking notes, studying at night, and learning everything she could. Now, she led a team of 15 nurses in the emergency department of Wilson Medical Center. Her department ran smoothly and efficiently. Patients received quick, careful attention, and staff worked well together. Maria had created clear guidelines that allowed nurses to make emergency decisions when needed, a policy that Mr. Wilson strongly supported. Maria walked through the emergency department, checking that everything was in order. She stopped to help a new nurse set up an IV, showing her the gentle technique she had always used with Mrs. Rodriguez. "Like this?" Maria demonstrated. "See how the needle goes in smoothly? It's more comfortable for the patient." The new nurse nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Santos. You make it look so easy." Maria smiled. "You'll get it with practice, and please, call me Maria." At noon, Maria took her lunch break. She went to the hospital cafeteria, which was bright and clean with good food, much nicer than at Riverdale General. She sat at a table near the window, looking out at the garden area where some patients were sitting in the sunshine. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Got an A on my science test. Dr. Miller's study tips really helped." Maria smiled. Sophia had joined the Young Doctors program at Westside Medical Center and was thriving. Dr. Miller had taken a special interest in her, impressed by her questions and enthusiasm. As Maria ate her lunch, Mr. Wilson appeared in the cafeteria. He visited the medical center regularly, often talking with staff and patients to make sure everything was running well. When he saw Maria, he came over to her table. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Of course not," Maria said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Mr. Wilson sat down, placing his coffee on the table. "How is everything in emergency today?" "Running smoothly," Maria reported. "We had a busy morning. Car accident brought in 3 patients, but everyone worked well together. All patients are stable now." Mr. Wilson nodded approvingly. "I heard from Dr. Peterson that your department has the highest patient satisfaction scores in the hospital." Maria felt a rush of pride. "We have a good team. Everyone cares about doing their best for patients." "That starts with good leadership," Mr. Wilson said. "You've exceeded all my expectations, Maria." "Thank you. That means a lot to me." They chatted for a few more minutes. Then Mr. Wilson said, "I have some news. Riverdale General Hospital is being sold." Maria was surprised. "Really? To whom?" "To Wilson Global Enterprises," Mr. Wilson said with a small smile. "The board approached me last month. They've been having problems since they lost some key staff." Maria thought about Tanya, and the other good nurses still working there. What will happen to the hospital? We'll renovate it, update the equipment, and most importantly, change the management style, Mr. Wilson explained. I was hoping you might help with that, actually. Me? How? I'd like you to create a training program for their nursing staff based on what you've implemented here. Show them how to balance protocols with patient care. Mr. Wilson looked at her seriously. Would you be interested in that? Maria thought about how things had come full circle. 6 months ago, she had been fired from Riverdale General. Now she was being asked to help transform it. Yes, she said confidently. I would be very interested. As Maria walked back to her department after lunch, she passed the hospital's main entrance. Through the glass doors, she could see a new patient being helped from a car. It was Mrs. Rodriguez. Maria rushed outside. Mrs. Rodriguez, what are you doing here?